I can always edit out.
Kind of coming in from the front doors, you would turn right down this hallway, and it's here. And mainly, a lot of our info is right here. You have a bunch of Usher name tags here. There's a couple of general ones, and then there's ones with specific names on it, and so on and so forth. And then here, which has a lot of information that's written down. This right here is usually filled out beforehand with a second collection to tell you whether or not you're getting a second collection taken out today or not. But the rest of it is stuff like you're signing your name to tell whether or not you're here, who your name is as an usher, and then it's numbers counting how many people are in the church or the chapel. So those are things that you'll find in here. Any questions?
Sometimes things will get turned into the usher room that get left behind during Mass. Keys, little kids, puppy dog, stuffed animal, something like that. So if someone comes back asking, you might just take a stop in here just to see if it is laying around in here somewhere.
Right, and that happens more often than you think.
Wheelchair, first aid stuff, including tourniquets, respectively.
Right. So we have some first aid kit there, with tourniquets for anybody that might need any of those addressed. A wheelchair, just in case there's somebody that might need a wheelchair over here. There's a lost and found basket. Don't worry about that, because that's more of, we're going to talk about that, but if you have something that's lost and found and nobody claims it, you take it to the parish office and leave a note, and then we'll take care of putting stuff in there. Anything else? Very good. And then I want to show one more thing here before we enter that. So the rest of our time will be in here, so if you want to have a seat, then we can go ahead and... All right, so there are baseline emergency plans that we have set up for ushers, just some general things to think about as you come to any Mass. Right now, if you're a teenager, you would try to refer to an adult on these plans, especially if there's an assistant usher there with you, or another usher there with you. Refer to an adult, talk to an adult about the things that are contained here. Use your best judgment. If you need to call 911 and you determine that's the right thing, that's the thing to do for the appropriate time, try to do that sooner than later. You want to try and be calm when you're talking to them. If they need our address, you have the address in the usher packet. There's also the address in the church bulletin. So there's a couple of resources you can use to find the address, just in case you would need to give that to the people necessary. And in some of these instances, it may not be necessary to disrupt the Mass, and if it is, the priest usually will do that for you. So try to do your best to not have to disrupt Mass while it's going on, and we'll go through some examples of where that would make sense. So moving to the first thing, tornadoes. So say that you hear the siren go off, you see outside that it looks pretty bad with the weather, and maybe you check your phone and it's like, oh yeah, I'm getting alerts. What do we do? So the first key thing is to keep people in the building, okay? You don't want people to leave. The second thing to think about is, where are there rooms without too many windows and are pretty closed in? So, and then direct people to those areas. So our usher room that we just showed is a great example of that. Bathrooms are a good example. Bathrooms can be found here and here over men's and women's, so you can put people in bathrooms. We have the confessional, the old confessional, that was a closet. You can use that. We have the new confessional. You can use that. There's a music storage room behind those doors to the left, and so on and so forth. You can use the parish office. There's some rooms in there. You can use that hallway, just so long as they're not too close to the window over near those big doors over there. So you're doing the best you can to use crowd control. There's hundreds of people oftentimes that come to Mass, so.
Are the confessional doors unlocked?
Usually they're unlocked. Yeah, they're unlocked at all times. So these doors you can just open up pretty easily. These doors you can, or if those ones right there are locked, you can just go through that door to the door that leads into the confessional from the back.
The doors over there look like they have a doorknob. It doesn't turn, you just pull them open.
Right. Yeah. Any other questions about the tornado policy as it stands? So for the fire situation, we do not have fire alarms or sprinkler systems in here. So right now, the best thing that we can do is, if it looks like a fire, smells like a fire, it's probably something that you need to investigate. And 2 people should investigate. So 2 of our ushers, as best as you can, should go and investigate where that is coming from. If it's something that's getting out of control, do call 911, and then direct people to exits away from the source of the flame. We have exit signs at the appropriate areas, including one that's an emergency exit over there. And then there's an exit sign here, exit sign there. You can go back to the chapel. Do the best that you can to move people calmly in that situation. Obviously, it can be a little bit hectic there. And then we have fire extinguishers for those people that would like to use them. They're located next to the restrooms out in the vestibule. Any questions or anything to add on that? What happens if you see a suspicious individual? So say that you're in the Mass and you see somebody that maybe is doing things that might not be kosher, or you kind of take a peek out here, somebody's coming into the church and they look a little bit suspicious. You keep an eye out. That's the most important thing. If needed, make sure that you're prepared to call 911 if you need that extra help. If it's a situation where somebody's coming in with a firearm, and that's obviously worst case scenario, but if it's a situation where Mass can get disrupted, let the priest disrupt Mass and stop doing what he's doing. Otherwise, try to handle the situation without disrupting the Mass and being quiet. If you need to personally address the person, have 2 ushers do that. Numbers always help. Sometimes people that look suspicious may not be anything to worry about. It just takes time. So if you have doubts or you're unsure, maybe just waiting and just letting them settle in might be the best thing to do. But sometimes they do things that continue to arouse your suspicion, in which case you need to address it. So that's where your judgment comes into play. Anything to add? Any questions? What if there's a medical emergency? Best judgment on calling 911 is important here. Sometimes we've had servers pass out, for example, and usually parishioners have been attentive enough to take care of the situation and they don't need help. But say that server hits their head and now there's blood. Okay, then you might need some more medical attention, and that might be more than we can provide. Then 911 would you would call 911 there. Again, trying not to disrupt the Mass as best as possible is the thing that you want to worry about there. And then if you know first aid, you can use it. We just showed where the first aid kit was back in the usher room. We have an AED out in the vestibule that has a big sign, and it's in a big box that has the AED. Or if you don't know how to use those things or you don't feel comfortable with that, try to find someone in the church that can. Sometimes there is a doctor. Sometimes there is somebody that knows how to do that stuff. Any questions, anything to add there?
If you really want to do something for your parish, take a class from the American Heart Association, one of the other outfits that offers CPR training.
Yeah, so just in case you couldn't hear that, taking extra classes for CPR, American Heart Association on some of those things can always be something useful to have. And then a couple of extra details here. Sometimes if people need extra towels or toilet paper runs out, we have a utility closet that has some of that stuff in there. The utility closet is located next to the men's bathroom. So there's an extra door that doesn't say men's. That's the utility closet. And then the AED, as we just discussed, is out in the vestibule. So that covers all the general emergency side information. Anybody have any questions about anything?
I think there again, just to reiterate that any of those items, if you're a teenager, refer to the adult on your team. Any of these situations, and parents don't feel that you're your teenager is responsible to be the lead on all these. There might be masses where it is just teenagers, but in general, if there's an adult near you, refer to the adult, let them know aware of something you've noticed, and let them take the lead.
Absolutely. All right, so now let's get into what you're normally doing at a Mass. When you're scheduled for a Mass, I'd always advise to try to arrive at least about 15 minutes before the Mass. It just gives you plenty of time to set up and do what you need to do before Mass, and then you're ready to go doing what you usually do, which is greeting people at the beginning. When you arrive, I'd recommend that you go into the usher room and check to see if that door's unlocked, and then get a name tag on you so that people know who the ushers are. You want it, only one usher needs to do this, but somebody needs to grab that key that we just showed how to do that. Somebody needs to go grab the key from box 1. Then after that, we have these narthex carpets here. So if I open the door up here, you can see carpets here, and just make sure they look nice. Straighten them out if they're rolled up, and make sure that it looks presentable for people walking in, especially if it's a day like this where there's snow outside, for people to clean their shoes off a little bit, and set them in line with the doors and so on and so forth. Coming over here, we have the lights, and what you'll do is you'll hit the one that says before Mass, the pre-Mass setting, and it dims the lights, so you'll want to make sure that the lights are set to that setting. There's a display that shows which ones are which buttons are which. And then, after that, you open all these doors. So you'll open all these doors. These doors can prop if you push long enough. This one is a little bit delicate, so we have a door stop, but you just push them, and they stay open. If you want to close them, you yank the other way. Before Mass, it's nice to have them open because people are filing in. That way you're not having to hold doors open, and you can stand out and be open like this. Then there's the audio-visual units. So these are for people that have hearing issues. And there's a lot of instructions over here of how these devices work. These units are in chargers, and then there's the headphones set up. So there's instructions on how to use those. You have headphones, and the cord plugs into the audio-visual unit. And then they just put it over, and you can adjust volume. You can put it on. So if there's any parishioner that asks, hey, I have trouble hearing, you can direct them over here, and then of course, then they can take that with them to their seats. You want to make sure that those units are in the charging stations before Mass. If there's one that's out and not in the charging station, just make sure to put it back in there so that the battery lasts throughout the Mass. When you're in the usher room too, make sure to check that book that we talked about, just to check to see, especially if there's a second collection in there. If it's circled no, or it's circled yes, you'll know what to do during that time, and we'll get to that point. Then after that, it's standing by the sanctuary entrances. So we have 4 stations for ushers, and if you kind of can take a peek here, the collection baskets give it away. So one usher station's right here. There's an usher station over near the choir area. There's another usher station over where these tables are at, and there's an usher station on the far side. And the collection baskets are placed accordingly. So if there's 2 ushers, I would recommend that take the center first, and then 3 and 4 can go out wide. But those are where the 4 usher stations are at. And so that way you have ushers ready to go. And so when you're greeting people, and this is a big thing here, I would stand out about here or something of that nature, but you're greeting people as they walk in, and what you're paying attention for is anybody that might need any extra help. Say somebody comes in with a cane or a walker that might need some help with moving that around, you're ready and available. You're saying hi to everybody, you're smiling, you're welcoming, you're the first point of contact. So you want to be the first sign of who the people in the church are that are welcoming us into this place, and you want it to be with smiles, with friendly demeanors and things of that nature, being social, and so on and so forth. Is there anything that anybody has any questions about right now to this point, or anything to add?
If someone does come in and they have a walker, it's usually best so that the walker doesn't sit in the aisle where someone could easily trip over it as maybe go to communion or something, that once they're seated, that you take the walker and just say, I'll just set it back here, I'll bring it to you right at the end of Mass. That way it's not in the way. Makes it safe for everyone. And they're usually very appreciative of that because most people know their walker's going to be in the way of someone walking. So they're usually appreciative of that. Gives you a chance to help them be seated as well. If they're on a walker, they're always nervous when you go from the support of the walker to making that transition to sitting in a pew that does not have an arm like any of the chairs they might have wherever they might be sitting at home or where they live. So it's always nice to help someone with a walker, but then take their walker away, and during the final song, bring the walker back up, set it next to the aisle, and they'll be really appreciative that you did that.
One of the things that you also, one usher can handle this, but one of the other things that you'll want to make sure that you do before the Mass starts is you want to choose at least 2 people to bring up the gifts. What are the gifts? You'll notice on this table right here, we have what's called a paten, which holds bread, and then a cruet of wine. Okay, so one person would take up each, right? And so you have at least 2 people to bring up these gifts. And we'll talk about how that works as we go through the Mass duties, but try to pick different people week to week. The struggle obviously is what happens when people say no, and then you have to start moving around and going to other people. But it's always nice if there's somebody that you maybe are so familiar with that comes in. Sometimes they might like to do that, and it's a nice touch. They come up and bring the gifts, but sometimes they don't feel comfortable with that. So,
A thought on that. A lot of times ushers think, well, I just need to invite someone maybe as children. Anyone in the congregation generally all folks enjoy taking it up. Sometimes they may not know exactly when during the service to take it up, so you can coach them a little bit. And also, some families and folks arrive 10 minutes before Mass. It's easy to ask them because they're first in the door that gets it off you as an usher your checklist. But you might just wait a little longer sometimes and see someone else that you haven't asked before, because some people are 10 minutes earlier and some walk in right behind the priest. So everybody arrives at a different time, so it kind of gives you a chance to give some different parishioners a chance to be involved in taking up the gifts.
we also want to be kind of keeping an eye out for empty spots in pews, especially at some Masses that get more full. Depending on the Mass or depending on the time of the year, seating can be obviously an issue, but say that you've got some families that are coming in and you can kind of keep an eye out for where's an empty pew that I could seat all these individuals. Say that you've got, of course, people that might need some assistance in getting seated because of age, or maybe there's pregnancy to deal with and things of that nature, and you can just tell that there's a struggle moving around. So do be paying attention to where those people might be seated as you're greeting and welcoming people here.
Another item to think about, human nature. Many people come in and they naturally just sit down within the first 2 or 3 seats at the end of an aisle. Well, as the pews begin to fill up, in particular on those Sundays where you have more stronger attendance, don't be afraid that if there's 8 openings in the middle and you see someone on the end, ma'am, sir, can you slide over for me? I have a family to be seated. If they sit on the edge of the aisle, they're used to being moved over. Some might prefer to stand up, let the one person or family in, and then they still sit on the aisle, and that's perfectly fine. Just don't be shy. Empty seats are empty seats. We just need to ask folks to be courteous and move along as we ask them to.
That's right. Any questions about anything that we talked about with what you do before Mass? Very good. So now Mass starts. Okay, the priest walks to the back with the servers and things of that nature. You hear the bells ring. When the lector goes up, it's time to turn the lights on. And so again, you're looking for the right setting on there. It's number 2, the Mass setting. So that brings these lights up, and now it's super bright, and everything's ready to go. Okay, you want to do that as the bells are ringing, as the lector's walking up to the ambo, so on and so forth. You don't want to wait until the lector starts talking too much, or it's, woe, or the opening song. You want to try to get the lights on because it's time, and that way it makes it easier to read what the lector has to read up there in the ambo, for example. You're watching for last arrivals by this point. Mass is going to start continuing as usual. You have opening song, you have the priest processing in with the servers, and then you have songs being sung, prayers being said. You're watching for people that straggle in 5-10 minutes after the Mass comes. One thing to note, the only entry point into the church at this point is through these doors. So people should only be coming in this way. We used to have it where people could enter in the back with the chapel and this door. We've recently locked those doors, so you don't need to move as an usher around. You're going to see everybody come into the church at the very least. So just kind of be attentive. As Mass begins and there's the stragglers that come in, that's where we talked about before. We're moving people in and crowd control here with the seats and the pews is ever more important because that happens a lot. So, using a physical gesture too to kind of get people going a little bit, being polite as best as you can to move people into the center of the pew. But that happens a lot right at that moment when Mass is already gone and it's 5 minutes in and the first reading's being read, but there's people that are coming into the Mass. So just be aware as an usher.
One thing we try not to do is seat anyone down the center aisle when Scripture's being read. We just hold off on that till the Scripture's completed, then we seat them. Also, once Mass is started, most everyone will enter through the side entrances. That's where the ushers, the four of them, are communicating, because if we filled up one of the side areas, in particular on the choir side, ushers need to be making eye contact, particularly in the middle. If someone's on the door by the choir, send them my way. Or 2, 3, 4, 5, just do numbers because you've been surveying your section and you know you've got the room. On busy Sundays, it's just generally eye-to-eye contact, usher to usher, to make sure we seat those last folks arriving.
Then the next thing after that, as that dies down, about when the gospel is read is a good time to start making a count because that's about the time when people stop coming in. So if there's 4 ushers, it makes it really easy. We have 4 sections of pews, so the usher over here counts the people in this section. The usher over here at this table with the gifts counts this middle section. If I'm standing here as this usher, I'm counting this section, and then the people over near the choir count the section in the front. You also make sure to count the people in the choir as well. Do not be so adamant about it being an exact number. It just needs to be a rough estimate. The reason we count is so that we can let the Archdiocese know what church attendance is, just in case we have to say, hey, we're either dropping or adding a Mass, and this is the numbers to back it up. That's what these numbers are for. So they don't need to be exactly on the button. They just need to be some rough estimate where you get it close enough, about 5, 10 people close enough, that's going to be good. So then after that, you're communicating with the ushers nearby to add up in total, and one usher can go back into the usher room and write down that total after you count the people that are seated in here. Anything to add? Any questions about it to this point? Anytime somebody's leaving the Mass to go use the restroom, it's always nice to assist them and be prepared, especially for people that might need the door to be open. So just standing here, by this point you're back here at the station, you might have a seat, but if you see somebody coming up this way and needing to go to the bathroom or need to use this door for another reason, you can just be there to kind of help them out if they need that extra help with the door. At a certain point, after the count is made, you can probably close the doors. It helps that, what am I trying to say here? It helps people pay attention to the Mass, and there's not going to be any people walking in that way. And then the next thing that we're paying attention to is the gifts, is the collection baskets. So, Father says a sermon or a homily, and then he finishes up with a homily. Then everybody says the creed. Okay. After the creed happens, then one usher, usually the person on the farthest side over here, takes a collection basket. And we have a chapel that has seating, and we allow people to sit in the chapel. So that usher needs to then walk down this side aisle, and I would recommend through the sacristy. So we're going to show you what I mean by that. So I'm going to take a collection basket from over at this station. This is the preferred usher to do it. But say that you don't have enough ushers over here, then it could be the person, the next person over, and so on and so forth. But somebody needs to once the prayers of the faithful begin. This is after the creed. I believe in the resurrection of the body and the life of the world to come. Amen. Then the Father says a prayer inviting the petitions to be read, which is we pray to the Lord, Lord, hear our prayers. But yet at this point, when that's happening with the Lord, hear our prayers, you're walking at this point, and you're coming through this door into the sacristy. Okay? Through the sacristy, it leads straight into the chapel. And that way you can pass the collection baskets to the people in the chapel for anybody. That's also a good time to count the people in the chapel, which is a separate number that gets entered back into back in the usher room. Once you do the chapel, you can come back into this door, and then you're set and ready to go for collection here. It's usually pretty good timing. You'll walk back in here, and that's when it's time to pass the basket here. But just in case, the time for when you pass the basket for the main area here for the pews, and this is for all the ushers, is when the priest says the prayer after the petitions, and everybody sits back down. And then there's a song that's usually started at that time. So that's the time for you as an usher to come over here and pass the gifts, or pass the baskets. For the rest of the ushers, you're in the back, so once people sit down, you're going to walk up to the front and do that. So you're going to walk up to the front into the front pews, and you're going to be passing baskets to these people in the front. And much of that is just kind of getting the baskets started, and then people pass to know what to do, and they move baskets around. But sometimes you might need to step into a pew and help because the pew is not full, so then you can then keep that line moving. So just be paying attention to that. So I'll walk back here.
Let me add one item. If there happens to be a mass, and you maybe just have two ushers, rather than two baskets for each aisle, you can always start one down the right aisle and one down the left aisle, and just follow those as they work their way back. It's not usually, if there's just one of you and you're doing two sections, if you start two baskets each side, you're going to get things mixed up, and you're going to do some pirouettes. So it'll take a little slower to do that, but just do one on the right side, one on the left side, and it generally does go a little smoother for you at that point.
Once those baskets get passed back, everybody kind of pulls that all into one, and we got a big basket, right? So you're pulling it into this basket here. Then after that basket gets taken over to the parish office, which goes through that door that says not an exit, and that's why having that usher key is going to be imperative, because you get into that door using this key. We recommend, especially if there's two ushers that go back there to handle the money and the finances, and that one of them is at least an adult. Obviously, sometimes that we can't always accommodate for that, but it's recommended that at least two ushers take care of the money back there, and one of them is an adult. Also during this time, especially for the usher that picked out the people with the gifts, pay attention to the people and look at them. It's probably a good idea to kind of look at them right as you're walking down for the basket. So you're going to find them, say that they were sitting right here. You want them to then come out and get set up with the gifts. This is how this works. One person takes a paten, holding it with two hands. Another person takes the cruet, holding with two hands. Okay. And then they stand kind of near here in the center aisle, and then the other person standing here. What happens is there's altar servers that come back, usually with candles, and they will come, or maybe there's one with a cross. But in any case, a server or two servers come back, and they will direct the gift bearers up. Okay. And they'll walk up the center aisle. And just for the intents and purposes of this, you would walk up to the father who's standing at the front steps, and then say that father's standing right here. You would give the gifts to father as he asks for them. He'll ask for the cruet, and then hand it back to a server, and then ask for the paten. And then you will take a bow to father, and he will take a bow to you. So you bow, and then after that you just go back to your seat. So those are the directions that you give to gift bearers, especially before the Mass if they ever were to ask, how does that work? How do I do that? Okay, how do I do that? You show them where the gifts are. You tell them the timing of it, which we're talking about is the same timing where the baskets are being passed around. okay, or where the prep of gifts happens after the prayer of the faithful. So that's where all that happens. Are there any questions, anything to add here on that front?
If you had an opportunity after Mass, thank the people that carried the gifts up.
Absolutely, yeah. Thank the people after Mass if you have an opportunity. Whoever brought up the gifts, it's always nice touch to just thank them and acknowledge. Thanks for helping us in the Mass and participating. The next thing that you're looking after that is communion. Communion for you as an usher. One thing to note, say that somebody comes in asking about gluten-free hosts. We do have gluten-free hosts. Generally, the priest is this line for communion, okay? I'm saying this as there's two lines in communion, one for this side and one for this side for the center aisles. He takes this side generally. The priest has the gluten-free hosts, so you direct people that are coming to Mass and asking about that into this line. With regards to during communion what happens, we start with communion up at the front of the pews and then work our way backwards. So you're not, as an usher, required to help people figure that out, because usually the Eucharistic ministers will go up and do that. They will go to their stations and then kind of look at people and invite. So don't worry about directing people into receiving communion, especially at the front end of it. When you're receiving communion, generally wait for everybody to receive in the section of the pew, and then you go last. So you're bringing up the rear. One thing to note here, we have a cry room. Cry room parishioners, attendees, people that are in the cry room that go up to receive, usually will either pick this section, or I've actually directed them for a while now to also use this line heavily. So if I was an usher at the station, I would just kind of keep an eye out for people in the cry room. And if there's anybody in there, just kind of direct them in that sense. So say, hey, do you want to receive communion? And then walk up that way. And pay attention to that. Otherwise you can certainly go up and receive last, once the last people here in the section have received. If you're on this side wide with the choir, and say there's a choir or the contemporary group or there's a children's choir, you as an usher should receive before they do, because it's always a bit of a nuisance to try to receive communion with musicians, because they're doing music things. So the timing of the music is not always going to line up with when the timing of these people are done and it's time to move to the next line. So don't rely on the musicians to time their reception of communion up properly when there's a big choir or there's a big group back here. You go before the musicians do. Now, if it's just an cantor and accompanist, the accompanist just receives last, so then you can go beforehand. But as a general rule, do go before the musicians do. Once the sections are taken care of with communion, ushers should be coordinating with each other about who's going to direct a Eucharistic minister to perhaps the back of the church, or the people in the church that need assistance with communion and can't walk up in the procession but would still like to receive, or say that there's an accompanist that hasn't received yet. So one Eucharistic minister usually by themselves is going to just go back to the chapel, and they're not going to need that direction. But it's the people that are in the back that you've been paying attention to and know they can't get to communion. So you're just paying attention to when a Eucharistic minister is freed up, and that's easy because you're going up and receiving last. So then you can kind of direct and say, hey, I see somebody's already in the chapel. We've got a couple of people in the pews that might need some communion. I'll direct you to those people. So be paying attention and communicating with each other as ushers and teaming up on that to make sure that everybody gets a chance to receive, and then give to the accompanist as well back there, just in case they haven't received.
And one item on pre-Mass that I think we didn't make note of. When you're seeing folks come in, someone in particular who is less mobile, as they're seated, you want to ask them as an usher, do you need communion brought to you? That way you know who, and usually that's in the last couple of rows. But you just ask them that way when it comes time. All the ushers are talking ahead of time. Do you have anyone needs communion? Do you have anyone needs communion? And so just open communication, and then it's real simple to bring them back. If you don't ask them and they don't grab you to say, hey, I need communion, then they're going to wonder if they're going to get it. Now, a little bit they're anticipating, or they're a little on edge. Do they know I need communion? So, as an usher in your section, as people come in, you just want to ask someone that's less mobile, do you need us to bring communion to you? Right. They'll always tell you yes or no.
Then, once everybody's received, the priest is up at the altar with Eucharistic ministers to help to clean things up, okay? And the priest is going to do a lot of things at the altar and send Eucharistic ministers their way. What you're paying attention for as an usher, especially if you're the usher in this section, where Bob is standing, you're going to then turn the lights now down to a new setting, which is the reflection or meditation setting at number 5. You do that when the priest sits down in his chair. So he's doing stuff at the altar, but when you see him walk back and sit down in the chair, that's the time to turn the lights down, okay? If the choir is singing something during meditation, and this is very rare at this point, but say that we're singing a song, you keep the lights on, even if the priest sits down. So just be paying attention to if there's a choir that's doing something. That almost never happens anymore, but on the off chance that it does, and it has happened before, just be paying attention to that. But most of the time, you are waiting for the priest to sit down if you're on the station and controlling the lights, and then you hit, I believe it's number 5, right? Okay. You turn those lights back on when the priest stands up and begins the next prayer. Or if there's any announcements to read, which almost always happens, as the lector goes up to read the announcements, it would be a good time to turn the lights back on. Always assume that the lectors have a tough time reading in the darkness, especially if it's night out and it's the 5 o'clock evening mass, you want those lights on. So either if there's no announcements and the priest stands up and begins the closing prayer, you turn the lights back on to the mass setting, or if a lector goes up to start reading the announcements, and you see that happening too. Lectors sit over on the far side front pews, so it's pretty easy to see them stand up in front of you and then walk up to the ambo and open up a binder. So be paying attention to that if you're controlling the lights. Any questions about communion, the gifts, anything to add there? One extra thing that may happen during communion, there's the second collection. If there's a second collection and that thing is circled yes in there, second collection happens when the lights get turned down. So once the lights get turned down, then you do the same thing that you did at prep of gifts. You're just doing it now for the second collection and passing those baskets around.
One note on that. Second, not everyone makes a donation or put something in the basket in second communion. In particular, when you start up front, if there's maybe just 1 or 2 people in an aisle, you're using your visual cues. If there's just 1 or 2 people in the first 2 or 3 aisles, I'm always just looking. If I can see they're staring straight ahead, their hands aren't moving, going to pick up a check or anything like that, I might walk on by to the next aisle. A lot of times the first 2 or 3 aisles in particular, you'll have that. It just makes things kind of go a little smoother. So just kind of use your eyes as you're doing that second collection in particular.
Then after that, the next thing that you're paying attention to is the closing song. The end of Mass is pretty quick at this point, so there will be a closing prayer and then a blessing that Father gives, and then it's time for the closing song to be announced. So that's when you reopen these doors back here, okay? Because now you got a lot of people that are filing out, so you'll open and prop these doors back up. As you prop these doors, do also take some bulletins, okay? These are the church newsletters, right? So there's bulletin slots here in the center vestibule. There's a big stack of extra ones. Just take some and have them in your hands ready to go. And what you're then doing, in the same way that you were before Masses when you were greeting people, you're saying have a good day, having a bulletin ready to pass out to people as they're going. Sometimes people don't want it, but you always offer it. So you just offer, they say no, okay, that's fine, but then some people would like to take one and so on and so forth. So that's the end of Mass. And the closing song will be happening at this point and people are leaving. So you're just there seeing everybody out. Anything to add here?
A note to the teenagers in particular, maybe to some of the adults, but in particular the teenagers. you feel young, you feel a little intimidated because you're younger here, and everyone leading is older. Everyone here is older than you. My dad taught me this is your first public speaking opportunity to learn how to speak in public and talking to people you do not know. So just about every person go by, you're trying to be as sincere as you can to the first person, as would be the 100th person. Have a nice day, have a good Sunday, have a good Sunday, have a nice day, and you're trying to teach yourself to be as sincere as you can to each person. You'll then get to know them, and they're going to know your face. Next time they'll know who you are. And then when I joined the parish 15 years ago, I was late 40s, but ushering was a great way I got to know people. They got to know my face, I got to know them a little bit. So it's real good for teenagers in particular, a good place to do your first public speaking, talking to people you do not know, and you'll find you're going to make church friends with those that are older than you. So here's Speech 101, Speech Class 101, at the back of the church.
You'll be very successful in high school, and you will pass all the classes with speech from this point on if you're an usher. You will have the F's there. One thing to note, if there was somebody that came in with a walker, okay, and if they're in your section, this would be the time to get that walker to them. Obviously, you've got a lot of people moving, okay, so do the best you can with moving around, but you can always say, excuse me, and they'll see the walker and they'll move out of your way, so, right? Because you want to try to get that, you want to try to be aware that that person might want to leave early, so just be ready to go with that walker as well. This is blending right into the aftermath at this point, okay? So you'll set that walker next to that person that needs it at the end of their pew, if you have a walker. We just talked about the passing out the bulletins. You'll be passing out the bulletins as people leave. After people have left, most people have left, I should say. And we say most people because there's some people that like to stay in the church and chat for a little bit. But after most people that you see have left the church, you can start walking the aisles and making sure that there's no trash, there's no left loose items, belongings, or lost and found items. We have hymnals here, and generally we'd like to keep one hymnal on the end of a pew. So if it's kind of just straggled over there and you see that, you can kind of just step in and move it over. If a pew's on a hymnal and it's not in one of these slots, you're putting that way, just kind of doing a general sweep of your section up and down these pews to make sure that it looks nice for the next Mass.
And that might be the time you start finding keys or cell phones. Keys they're going to notice very, very quickly. Cell phones, they might notice quicker than the keys actually that they're lost. So rather than just going directly to the office, it's usually if you find something in the aisle, while you're still here the next 5 or 10 minutes while people are leaving, there's a good chance they might realize it before they drive away, or they get a block away and they come flying back in the door looking for their almighty phone. So that after that, then if they don't come in and reclaim what they've got, that's when you take it into the office and sit on the reception desk. And it's always good to put a post-it note found in whatever Mass it was, 5 o'clock, 8 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 11:30. That way there's a little bit narrower of an identification of what was found when.
Right. Just in case somebody calls, that's happened the number of times too, where the parish office then gets it to the people. So once you get it into the parish office, leaving a note, it's out of your hands, and the parish office will take care of it. Then after that, you'll close the double doors to the sanctuary. You'll put your name tag back in the usher room. You'll return this key to box 1 using the same code that you did to get the key. You'll return it back to 1, and then you're done. And it's time, and we're done for next Mass.
Do we need to show them the safe in the parish office?
Well, yeah, we can do that. Let's do that right now.
So the guys in the county room, the trustees, they come empty the safe when they start the process. And they'll finish before the last mass is over for the day. And they expect class collection. Otherwise, they're not going to know when it shows up in the safe. So they're expecting the ushers to take the last collection to the counting room.
I see.
Does that make sense?
Yes, it does make sense.
Because, I've been back there before work. It's the last collection, and we're ready to go. It's getting late.
Right.
Only to find out that, it's in the safe.
It's in the safe. Yeah, so that counting room is in the same area code with the parish office. You'll hear voices. That's one thing, but let's go ahead and show where that is.
And the other
for
thing, Mike,
camera.
is that the green bags for the second collection.
Yeah, that we did talk about that one. So, anybody want to add any general notes to just to reconsider? I've got a couple. So, especially for our brand new ushers, you're not going to do things perfectly the first time, probably. Nobody does. So it's a learning process for you. So, asking questions is always absolutely welcome and things of that nature. Asking around to experienced ushers that you're serving with, or if a priest is around, or say that I'm around at that mass because I'm doing the music, you can ask me questions. We have these packets here that go through all the information that we just went over today, with information written out in detail, and especially the order of the stuff that you're doing in mass, pre-mass, mass, post-mass. They are in the usher room, so each one of these packets, you can take one with you, or they're just there and extras, and I can always print more copies, and so on and so forth. But if you ever need to remind yourself of what you're doing and what you're thinking about, these packets will be provided for you, so you have that information ready to go. So always ask questions. Don't be so worried about getting it perfectly the first time. It's just getting used to it, into a routine. It's a great way to serve Mass and serve the liturgy in the parish, and we thank you for volunteering your time and your treasure and your talent to giving the gift back to God. So thank you very much.